Everyone's talking about AI these days, right? This season on Compiler, we're diving deep into how AI is reshaping the world we live in. Join us for a new season of Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to leave up holiday decorations year-round. Others have the need to use their garage as practice space for their new metal band. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
Coming up on episode 215 of Wheel Bearings, we've got the 2021 Mazda Miata RF Grand Touring, the Hyundai Sonata N-Line, the Mazda MX-30 EV, the Ford Maverick, and British drivers looking for EVs when they can't find gas. All that and more coming up next. Did you know you can support Wheel Bearings directly? Head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia and you can become a patron today. Your contributions will help fund the platforms and tools we use to bring the podcast to you. And exclusives and improvements are already on the way thanks to your generosity. So if you want to be part of an automotive podcast like no other, head to patreon.com/wheelbearingsmedia. This is episode 215 of Wheel Bearings. I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
I am Nicole Wakeland from True Car.
And I am Roberto Baldwin from Kelley Blue Book.
Oh, I almost said that. A good thing I didn't.
Excellent.
I would have picked. I would have picked somewhere else.
You would have picked somewhere else. Okay.
Well, since Robbie's been so bogged down in work the past week that he didn't get a chance to drive anything, we will start with Nicole. Nicole, what did you drive?
I had the 21 Hyundai Sonata, but not just the Hyundai Sonata. I had the Sonata N-Line, which is sort of the performance version of the Sonata, which sounds, honestly, it sounds a little bit silly because you're like, it's a sedan, it's a performance version, it's a Hyundai. None of those things seem to fit together. Like you've taken these disparate pieces that don't belong together. They do. They actually come together, and they come together quite nicely. The engine in this, I didn't write the specs, I just wrote the horsepower because apparently that's what I was focused on. 290 horsepower, 311 pound-feet of torque, CVT. So now the big thing is, 290 horsepower in the N-Line. The rest of the lineup, you get either 180 or 191. So it's a pretty big jump in horsepower. It's not an insignificant change. It is a I'm going to find it. No, I'm not going to find it. Here we go. It's a 2.5 liter.
Did you say it has a CVT?
Oh, I'm sorry. It does not have a CVT. It has an 8-speed. You're right. I don't know why I said that. It does not. I saw the wrinkle in your brow. I was like, wait, I said something wrong.
Because somehow the idea of putting a high performance engine into this thing with a CVT just seems totally incongruous. It's like,
clearly, I need one more sip of my coffee. Let's try that again. That has an 8-speed dual clutch automatic. How's that sound? A little bit better?
Yeah.
And
Much
it's
better.
a 2.5 liter turbocharged Ford. And like I said, it's 290 horsepower. That's versus the 180 or 191, depending on which engines you choose for the rest of the lineup. So it's a pretty big jump in horsepower, and you do feel it. There's a big difference in how this one drives. It's more responsive. It's more aggressive. If you're getting on the highway, you don't really have to think about how close that guy is behind you. You've got enough power to accelerate wherever you want to accelerate, which is really nice. So it does make this sort of almost kind of mild-mannered sedan a hot little sedan. It's fun to drive. Like I truly enjoyed it. I like the Sonata anyway, and any of its guises, because I've driven a couple of the others. So it's no surprise that I like this one even more. And it comes with all sorts of extra little goodies that, if you think of it, it's like the top of the Sonata lineup, and then they shove this cool engine in there too. So you get 8-way power front seats. There's Napa leather, and the seats are special N performance seats, so they're a little bit more bolstered, not like so heavily bolstered that you feel like you're being strapped in and you can't move. Like if you have a larger frame, you can still get comfortable, but they are a little bit more bolstered. You have the upgraded infotainment, which has a 10.25 touchscreen, so this nice large touchscreen. You get navigation, you get Apple CarPlay, you get Android Auto, you get a 12-speaker Bose audio system that sounds fantastic. You get wireless charging. So basically think of this as your top trim of the Sonata. This is what you're getting, but they put the cool engine. I love it, but you are going to pay a bit of a premium for it. So if you went with a base cheapest version of the Sonata you can get, it's just over 24,000, 24,150. You want to do the N-Line, it is 34,100. So you're paying an extra 10 grand, but mind you, you're getting extra features, you get extra safety, you get
all
better
the
infotainment.
Things.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, here we gave you an engine, we'd like $10,000 for it. It's we gave you an engine and all this other stuff, we'd like $10,000 for it. I kind of think it's worth it. I mean, if you like the performance, I don't feel like the other versions of the Sonata, you get in them and you drive them and you think, meh, this is awful. This is a milquetoast sedan. It has it's not like they're terrible. Sometimes you find when you move up, like engines, especially in sedans, the base engine is a miserable place to live. Like it has no power, it has no response, and you don't want to drive it. You step up and suddenly this is what should be the base trim. Like get rid of that other engine. Not so in this one. This one feels responsive no matter what you drive, but if you sort of crave that little extra bit, little oomph, then go with the N-Line. And it's roomy. It's, you can easily sit 3 people in the back seat. It's not one of those like, oh, we say it sits 3, but only if they're very skinny teenagers or toddlers. No, 3 adults can sit back there. So I'm a fan. Yeah.
I do love the Hyundai Sonata a lot. I drove it the first time we drove it was the Korean spec. So I had a smaller engine, but we drove it in Korea. So it was okay, I guess. And then later that trip, they let us drive the U.S. spec on like their proving grounds in Korea. But no, I sat in the back, I sat in the front, and he was like, "This is a really nice sedan." We myself and the other people who were driving with me back when that was a thing, we really enjoyed it. Yeah, no, I'm a fan of this Hyundai Sonata, and I think the N-Line, I'm sure, is pretty dope from what it sounds like.
I like the styling on it because it strikes this neat balance where it's so like when you make a sedan, like you don't want it to look bleh, but it also shouldn't look like it's like a little pocket rocket of a hatchback either. Sometimes they make them so aggressive. I'm like, now you guys have gone too far. They did a nice, like, we will keep it looking like a nice sedan, but we're going to not make it boring. So when you look at the front of it, like the way the lights and the trim sort of the way they come down the hood, the way everything is accented, it looks good. Like you're not going to just walk by it and think, whatever. You walk by it and think, oh, that's kind of a good looking car. So I like how they did it.
And it's not over-designed, as we've talked about with some other brands, in this segment. It's got enough flourishes to make it interesting without making it look like they didn't know where to stop.
Right. And that's what happens in so many of them, especially in the front end. Like the back, you're like, okay, they did a nice job. And then you come around the front, you're like, oh, there's so much happening, so many angles, so much stuff. There's plastic, there's chrome, there's vents that don't need to be there. What is happening? And it's overwhelming, and it makes it look messy and cluttered and not cool. And this one, I'm like, oh no, there's just enough there that you think, okay, nice looking sedan. Not seriously, if this is what you want, go find yourself like a Civic hatchback or something. This is not your car.
Yeah. It's funny because you talk about how the front is always aggressive and the back sort of like, And I mean, the reasoning for that is for buffering and whatnot. But it always looks like they got super excited about designing the front of the car, and then by the time they got to the end, it was like 11 o'clock at night. They were all full of pizza. They're like, I just kind of shave it off. Let's all go home. Lights.
There's a spot to open the trunk, stick our badge right in the middle. Good, let's go.
Let's go home. We're done. Look at all the cool stuff we did at the front. It's like
front's awesome. Don't look at the back. We're sleepy. We've had pizza. Yeah.
It's every hobby I've ever done ever. You're just like, yeah, at the beginning, by the end, you're like, oh God.
Then you're done.
I'm done.
Excellent. All right. So I had something quite different. I had the 2021 Mazda Miata RF Grand Touring, which, as longtime listeners will know, I am a fan of Miatas. I own one. And the RF, of course, is the retractable hardtop version. And the Grand Touring, has all the options. It has all the goodies on there. I love driving Miatas. Fortunately, this one came with a manual transmission, not the optional automatic.
Yay!
No one should ever buy a Miata with an automatic transmission.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's sacrilege. Why would you do that?
Exactly. And it also came in what I personally consider to be probably the best color available in the entire automotive industry today, Soul Red Crystal.
It is
metallic.
the best color of any car. I love how that looks.
Mazda's
It's
really
gorgeous.
good. Mazda's reds are.
They should get rid of all the
Chef's
other
kiss.
colors. Just make those reds. That's
Yeah.
it. Get rid of all the other colors.
Just make everything in Soul Crystal Red, and they would probably triple their sales.
Like, what did you buy? I bought the red car. Everybody would know what it was. The red car company, that beautiful red. Oh, it's
Listening
so
off in the distance, like
It's-
yeah, there it is. There's the Mazda.
It's a gorgeous red, and I spent some time yesterday. I went out for a drive in the countryside. I am less a fan of the RF version. I guess I would be more a fan. Let's put it this way: I'd be more of a fan of the RF version if I was driving a Miata in Michigan year round. I drive my Miata, when the weather's nice. I don't drive it with, I don't drive it in the wintertime. It's never exposed to salt. So if I was using a Miata, in regions where you get winter weather year round, then not that we get winter weather year round, but if I was driving it year round in regions where we get winter weather, I would probably be more of a fan of the RF.
Seattle. How about Seattle? There we go.
Seattle would work.
Because it's
too.
rainy, it's not salty.
Where it's raining all the time. Yeah. So, the RF, unlike the third generation Miata, they first introduced a retractable hardtop on the third gen Miata, and that one was a 3-piece that when you looked at it when it was up and you looked at it in profile, it looked exactly the same as the convertible, and it fit in. It completely retracted under the lid in the same space as the convertible top. And with the top down, it looked exactly like any other Miata convertible. That was the NC generation. For the ND, they created this RF, which is partially retractable. So when you retract it, the roof panel goes down, pops down behind the seats, and the rear window also drops down. And as it's going through this little dance of pieces moving around, the B pillar lifts up and moves back, and then goes back into its original position. So what you're left with is kind of more of a Targa than a convertible, and it does have because the back window drops down, you do have airflow through the under the Targa bar. I generally prefer full-blown convertibles, top completely down. I look around, there's nothing around me. That said, this thing still drives like a Miata and still drives fantastic. And one of the cool things when Mazda did this current generation Miata a few years ago, they actually reduced the weight from the previous generation, got it back down to the point where at least the regular convertible version is almost the same weight as the original 1990 Miata.
Wow.
It's about 2,100 pounds. The RF, I think, is about 100 pounds or so heavier because of the top mechanism. But it's easy to get in and out of compared to a lot of smaller convertibles. If you have physical mobility issues, it might still be a challenge because it is still fairly low, but it's not bad to get in and out of. It's reasonably roomy, and it's quick. It handles great. The gearbox is is a slick shifting gearbox. It's a 6-speed manual transmission. It's not a particularly powerful car by modern standards. It's a 2-liter 4-cylinder, naturally aspirated, 181 horsepower, 151 pounds-feet of torque. But in a car that weighs, between 21 and 2,200 pounds, that's plenty. Frankly, in a car that probably weighed 500, 600, 700 pounds more, it would still be plenty. But it feels really good in this vehicle. The base convertible Miatas start at a little over $26,000. The RF starts at $33,045 for the Club, which is the base model, and that gets you 17-inch wheels, 9-speaker Bose audio system. The Grand Touring that I drove is another $1,500, so it's $34,525. That gets you a few additional things like heated leather seats, which if you're going to drive it in the wintertime, or even fall or early spring with the top open, but it's still kind of crisp out, but the roads are clear. Having those heated seats is really nice. It keeps your backside warm, but you can still enjoy the open air. It's got navigation, adaptive front lighting. That starts at $34,525. All in, the one that I've got in the driveway right now, the only option on that is that Soul Red Crystal Metallic, which is an extra $895, and it's worth every penny.
Worth every penny.
It's absolutely worth it. So
you can find your car.
With delivery, it came to
from space.
Yeah, it came to $36,365, which is I think a pretty reasonable price for a really fabulous sports car. And as I said, with the hardtop as an RF, it's eminently drivable in wintertime. Just put some snow tires on it, some winter tires, so you get decent traction. And I have driven Miatas in the past in the middle of winter. I've driven them in February. I had a retractable hardtop NC, the third generation model. I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. In the middle of February, it came on winter tires. It was fine. It was great. It's got traction control, stability control, ABS, all that stuff. So it's very easy to drive. Obviously it doesn't have a whole lot of ground clearance. So if the snow is very deep, you might want to leave it home and take something else. But other than that, it's great. It's a great all-weather car. And then you get open air motoring as well. The Miata still has Mazda's older generation infotainment system, which is okay. It's a 7-inch screen that sits above the dash there, but it has support for Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so you can use those. It's
what doesn't it have, Sam?
I love this thing.
What doesn't it have?
It does not. It does not have a touch screen.
Okay, thank you.
No touch screen. But you know what? Your hands in a Miata, your hands should be on the steering wheel, not on not on the touch screen.
If you can see the eye roll I'm giving him. Okay.
Just set it up wherever you want before you go, and then just don't touch it again. Just keep your hands on the wheel or on the shifter. That's all you need to touch.
Turn the radio on. Put your favorite CD on, or I guess audio.
Yeah.
Album. I don't know. Put your favorite album
CD.
on.
What are you living in, Roberto? Like 1995? Your favorite CD?
Put in your favorite cassette tape.
No, I'm not even sure if this thing has a CD
Nothing
player.
has a CD player. I was thinking about CD players yesterday because I'm working on the Jag right now because it feels like it has some sort of it's being starved of gas at certain instances. So I don't know if it's like vapor lock or if it's dirty fuel inject. I don't know. So I'm trying to figure it out. And I was sitting in it yesterday listening to it, and I was looking at the CD player, and I was like, I got some CDs in the house. I guess there is a CD, and my wife put a mix CD that I had made in 2001 in there. So, but yeah, CD players, kids.
They're the future. I don't think I have a single CD left. I bet my husband does somewhere, but I don't have any.
I don't have anything that plays CDs in my house other than probably my PlayStation.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I guess that would play CDs.
We have one of those. There you go. That's how I could play a CD.
Oh, I have a Blu-ray burner that I absolutely never use. I'm sure that probably plays CDs.
There you go. So we have two. Between the three of us, we have exactly three options.
We have three options, and they're all at my house.
Well, I have a DVD burner around here somewhere, an external USB DVD.
I love how we're I think we have this thing. I think we have that thing. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. Mine's not even in a case. It's all open.
I do have that DVD burner.
See, there you go. So that's four.
We have that one here, and I have a PlayStation upstairs. So that's five.
That's five.
So really,
and I think there's actually an old DVD player in a closet somewhere.
Oh, that's six.
I didn't get rid of
in a closet somewhere.
5.75. That's 5.75. Abilities to play CDs.
To play a CD. None of which will let us play one in a car, but whatever.
The last Prince concert, I went to the Prince's when Prince was doing that tour where he was playing the piano, and at the end of the concert, they were handing out CDs, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome!" And then I just looked at it. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? I still have it. It's still wrapped. It's like, it's one of the last concerts where he passed away. Right. But I'm just like, and it's still wrapped, not because I'm like, oh, I got to save this forever because I love Prince and I love, his music and I went to this tour and then he passed away. No, it's just wrapped because I don't know where to play it. I guess I could play it in the car.
There you go.
There we go. In the car, people.
When I graduated in 1990 and I bought my Mustang, my first Mustang, CDs were still comparatively new. They were about 6 years old or so at that point. And, I actually, like the following year, I went out. It came with a single CD player.
Ooh.
An in-dash CD player. But I went out and got a Pioneer. Back then, Pioneer had these multi-disc players that you could get, and they had a cartridge system that you could put 6 CDs into, and you could use it in the car or use it in with a home CD changer that accepted the same cartridges. So over time, I bought tons of those cartridges and put all the CDs in there, and I would just swap those in and out, and I installed that thing in the trunk, and that was great. But
I had a 6-disc CD changer in the trunk of my Beetle. You had to go out, and it would always get stuck. And then when it got stuck, you'd have to wait till you parked somewhere, and you'd go out, open your trunk. My husband did the coolest thing. He did I'm an engineer, and I have bungee cords kind of thing. He had a car that did not have a CD player back when everyone had CD players. So he had a giant boom box that played CDs, and he put the CD player in that. But the problem is you go over bumps. So he had used bungee cords that he put through
suspended from the
handles
ceiling,
and your entire back seat is now to play CDs. And he was like, yeah, we were in college. He's like, what's the problem? Okay, that's fine, I guess. And I could still see the image of this
thing. Seems like a perfectly reasonable solution to me.
I know, right? See, because engineers,
floating around.
Yeah, we could go over big bumps. He's like, look, it didn't skip. I'm like, are you aiming for bumps just to prove how cool your little CD setup
is?
Okay,
he was.
CD.
He was.
Mm-hmm, pretty much. Yeah.
That's how he wooed you. That's all I'm saying.
Exactly. That's how he wooed me. I'm like, the man can make a CD player not skip in his little whatever the heck it was. I'm in.
Let
30 years later,
let us share our life together and have children.
And he's still cobbling things together with bungee cords and 2x4s, so not much has changed.
That's all we need, really. I buy bungee cord all the time. I'm at Harbor Freight Tools. I'm like, I probably need some more bungee cords.
Oh my God. We have bins of them. Oh my God. So many bungee cords.
All right. Enough of the Miata. Just, if you want a sports car, go buy a Miata. They're great.
If you're too tall, you can get a BRZ.
You won't go wrong.
The BRZ is a Miata for tall people.
Yes. The only flaw in the BRZ is there's no convertible.
Yeah,
version.
that is.
But other than that.
Yeah. Boo earns.
All right.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to leave up holiday decorations year-round. Others have the need to use their garage as practice space for their new metal band. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
So this week, Nicole and I both did some traveling. Nicole took a couple of trips. Let's start with the first one that you did, which was to Tennessee to drive a truck.
So I went to Tennessee and drove the Ford Maverick, which is their baby truck. It's the littlest of the trucks. I feel like there's a million different, little baby truck. He's like, Roberto's like rocking it like it's a baby. Tiniest little truck. But it is still a truck. Like there's this sort of sense they get smaller and smaller. Like the Ranger, it can do all this off-road stuff and it's capable of a small truck. You're like, wait, we're smaller than a Ranger? What are we doing now? The Maverick it's a great option for people who want a little bit of truck, but aren't going off-road and, really heavy-duty off-roading, don't need the heavy-duty capability, but you want a little bit of that. It's like a very livable truck. Especially the bed, there are roughly a billion different ways you can configure things in the bed of this truck. So Ford is going to sell you whatever kind of pieces you want, but they didn't want you to have to feel like you have to buy pieces, because this is an affordable truck. It starts at $19,995. It's not like this, $50,000 truck and you have all this money to spare because clearly you've got a big budget and you're going to buy all your accessories. They wanted people to be able to use it however they want to use it. So the way they've designed the bed, there are areas where you can slide in like a 2x6, I guess it would be, and you can create partitions in there. Then you can slide pieces of plywood or whatever on top, and you can create 2 levels. And do you want it to be 2 levels all the way deep, or do you just want like a second level in the back, but only 1 level in the front? It even has the tailgate. It has like the cable that holds the tailgate up. You can move that cable so you can readjust your tailgate. So instead of fully opening, you can just have it partly open. And when you do that, you can literally put a piece of plywood in the back and it comes directly and sort of props perfectly on that tailgate. So you could either store stuff, or once again, you've created multiple levels and things. It is the most versatile truck bed for such a small truck. You wouldn't really sort of expect them to have thought that much about it, but they did. They were really trying to get to that person who's like, I just need that extra versatility, but I don't want I don't want even as big as a Ranger, and I don't need the capability of a Ranger, and I definitely don't want what an F-150 offers. And I think the Maverick does a good job of that. They were very specific in saying, this is not your, I'm going to crawl up rocks on the weekend truck. Like if you want, we drove up a fairly rugged trail, but I mean, it wasn't like we had to crawl. It wasn't like you had to have any particular skill set. It was loose rock and stuff, but you could have probably done it in a heck of a lot of, decent SUVs as well. And I asked about it. They said, if you want that really super, super capability, if you really want to be able to do that and to go off-road every weekend, that's why we have the Ranger. That's who the Ranger's for. This is not a Ranger. This is a Maverick. And it's got, the other nice thing about it is there's 3 trims, starts at $19,000. So it's affordable. It has a standard hybrid engine. So you're getting a hybrid truck, and that's the standard powertrain. That's the only powertrain that you're getting, and it's fantastic. It's going to make sure that you're on the base, and it's going to make sure that you're able to do everything that you need to do. It doesn't feel like this like sloppy, underpowered, like, oh, I put a hybrid in a truck. They have a hybrid now available in the F-150. So they've got this hybrid thing. They've got it figured out. It's smooth. It's responsive. I really liked it. I thought that the interior even is a very comfortable, easy to live with interior, I guess. It's not something that you feel like sometimes when you get a cheaper vehicle, it feels every bit the cheaper vehicle. This doesn't. It doesn't feel like it's like, it doesn't feel like it's cheap. It doesn't feel like you've got like plastic fantastic everywhere. They used, it's not leather and wood trims and metal everything, but it's still attractive and well designed. And they have really neat stuff on the doors. The doors, when you have water bottles, you have a standard water bottle, it fits. You get any of those sort of fat water bottles or taller water bottles, you can't put them on the door. You can't put, yes, he's holding one up right now. In fact, I believe that even has a Mustang logo on it that you're holding up, Sam. Look at that. Look at how indeed on brand you are. But you can fit, the way they've done the door handle, normally you have the armrest that goes like fully the length of the door. It kind of only goes part way, like the handle is a part way situation. So there's a spot where you could put a gigantic water bottle in there and it would hold, which is kind of nice. Again, it's just like sort of little things that make it more livable. So the interior is really, really well designed. There's a couple little small trucks, like you've got the Hyundai Santa Cruz out there. I feel like the Maverick is a more trucky truck. How's that? And you have the hybrid, like that's your base engine. If you want the base, that's your cheapest engine. You can get a turbocharged 4-cylinder that's a little bit more horsepower, a little bit more torque. If you want that, go for it. But it's not like driving the hybrid. You feel like you're driving a hybrid. It never really feels like it. You never feels underpowered. You never feel like it's lacking. So if you want to go up, okay. But you don't have to. If you want this super affordable, small dimensions truck that actually is easy to move through a city, easy to park in a parking lot, easy in narrow spaces, affordable, has just enough capability and an unbelievably versatile interior, Maverick.
Maverick. Yeah, I like the idea that Hyundai and Ford have both sort of looked at what Honda's been doing with the Ridgeline. And said, you know what? Not everyone needs a gigantic truck. And as soon as they put the Maverick on sale, the amount of people who are like, oh yeah, we totally want that. That seems like something that you know. I mean, a Maverick is like a Maverick or a Ridgeline. Are like the perfect size for people like me who do like, you know, I like to go places and do things, and sometimes it'd be nice to have a truck, but most of the time I just rent a truck whenever I need one. When we had the Ridgeline, it was great because we could go and buy big giant things and put mulch in the back of the car because that's what you do. $20,000. It's the cheapest Ford. It's no, they're going to sell a ton of these, and you know, at the expense of the Ridgeline and at the expense of the Santa Cruz, just because Ford is so well. The F-150 is a nation in itself versus the rest of the world when it comes to vehicles, and so when you have that,
the
heritage,
F-150 business is bigger than a lot of car makers.
Yeah, it's bigger. Yeah, it's bigger than Nike. I think I read somewhere. It's pretty big. Yeah, so
huge.
So if you're a Ford person, which you know, I grew up in a small town. A lot of people who drive a lot of trucks, and there was still the Ford versus Chevy fights. So I'm sure people are, you know, there. I'm not going to buy a Honda Ridgeline. I'm not going to buy a Hyundai. I'm going to buy a Ford, and I think they're going to sell a ton of these. And
I think so too.
I can't wait to try it and pick up mulch. That's all I'm saying.
And you could pick up a lot of mulch. Like they had it. It was interesting. They had it set up in a couple different configurations just so that we could kind of see like the kind of versatility they wanted us to be able to understand that it had in the trunk. And they had like a couple of bikes in the back, and then they had adjusted that tailgate to that sort of halfway position. They provides a nice stop for for that stuff. And then they have the bed rails that they have options for where you can, you know, there's tie down clamps everywhere so you can secure everything. They even had it full of sporting equipment where they showed how they sort of like leveled things differently. And like there's the netted things you throw like footballs or soccer balls in when you're taking, and they're like, oh, but if it opens because you have this little part, you know, you put your little pieces of wood in there, now they're just floating around in a little spot instead of bouncing all over the back of your truck. And they had a lot of different configurations to show you, and there is a lot of versatility. They also did something really neat with this, and I'm forgetting what they actually called it, but they made things very 3D. They're going to do a lot of 3D printing compatibility with this. So there is a clip on the back of the center console, and it's just like a little clip that sneaks in, and it's a tiny little thing. You can make 3D printed stuff using that clip so that you could have, say you want the back of that to be a space to hold your phone and you want to 3D print a special phone holder, do it. You want to 3D print a little trash can, do it. You want to 3D print some fancy thing to hold whatever, your phone and your laptop, or just, you can, and it just clicks right in. They have the same thing inside. When you lift up the rear seats, they flip right up, and there's storage in there that, again, there's the ability to make stuff and 3D print stuff for this that is exceptional. I mean, if you want to go and you want to pay for Ford stuff, knock yourself out. Ford will sell it to you. But they wanted this to be, you know, this is an entry-level truck. They wanted it to be something that if you are younger, especially, you know, younger folks are more likely to be playing with the 3D printed thing, you can make this work for whatever lifestyle it is that you want. I thought this was amazing. I think it feels like a truck. Like you were saying, you know, people love their Fords, the F-150 is a nation unto itself. If you're that guy or that girl and you love trucks, you're like, I am not driving that. I live in a city. I'm not driving an F-150 in the city. This is your chance to get something that still does trucky stuff, gives you just enough, easy access to the bed. It's not as tall as, you know, an F-150. It's low. It is a very versatile truck. I think they're going to sell a zillion of these things.
Oh, yeah.
I think you're right. And, you know, going back to, you know, before the two of you joined the show, I mean, for years we've said that the Ridgeline, you know, is really all the truck that most truck buyers actually need. You know, it's got more than enough capacity in it. It's, you know, big enough. And now, you know, I would say these new smaller trucks, you know, the Maverick and the Santa Cruz are an even better fit for most people than even a Ridgeline. And the current generation Ranger is actually quite a bit larger than the last generation Ranger that went out of production in, I think, 2011 or 2012. This one is significantly large. The current one is significantly larger. The Maverick is actually much closer in size to that old Ranger. It's actually total length, it's midway between the regular cab and extended cab versions of the old Ranger. So it's a little bit shorter than the old extended cab Ranger, but a little bit longer than the regular cab. And with this, you get a full crew cab, so you got room for 5 people. You've got the bed's shorter than it was in the old Rangers, but that's fine. It's still, I think, plenty big enough for what most people need for truckish stuff. I like what you were saying, Nicole, about some of those touches, like the cables that hold the tailgate. Because when you put a sheet of plywood in there, there's 4 feet between the bed rails, but not between the wheel wells. Mm-hmm. So if it's set up so that when you put that bed halfway down, or the tailgate halfway down, you slide in those sheets of plywood. They sit on top of the wheel wells, right, and across the tailgate, and it actually slopes down slightly towards the front, so that it's not going to slide out the back. So you can put those big sheets of plywood in there. You can do all those cool things with it, and especially gas prices are up compared to where they were not so long ago. That hybrid, 40 miles per gallon city, that's great fuel economy. So I think that this will be appealing to a lot of people. There are a couple of things that people should note, though. At that base $20,000 price point, Ford did have to skimp on a few things to hit that price point, like a lot of the driver assist stuff. That is part of the Copilot 360 package is not included. It's not standard on there at that $20,000 price point. It's an extra $540 for the Copilot 360 package that gets you the blind spot monitoring, cross traffic alert, but you also get a full size spare with that and a lane keeping system. You do get automatic emergency braking as standard, but those other touches you will have to pay a little extra for. And if you start optioning this thing up, just like with buying a Ranger or an F-150, the price does climb pretty steadily. Like the 2-liter turbo with 4-wheel drive and the trailer towing package, and on a Lariat, that'll get you up to about $37,000, which is still that's cheaper than what you're going to pay for a Ranger Lariat,
right?
But it's not quite as cheap anymore.
It does climb up, but that's like and you're right, but that's almost like a warning with any truck. Like starting price is $30,000, but what you're probably gonna, unless you're just like, I want that cheap truck to do cheap truck things, I want the base trim, I don't care about all the bells and whistles. Trucks, it feels like more than any other kind of vehicle out there, suddenly you've doubled the price of your truck. You're like, I thought all I did was get heated seats. What just happened? And suddenly you've doubled your cost. So it's really easy to do that. Yeah, it's super easy to do. And truly, like you said, Sam, this is no exception. If you start adding options, and they do offer, even on the base trim, you can option that turbocharged engine, you can option all-wheel drive and the tow package and Ford Copilot 360 and all that stuff. You start packing that stuff onto the base trim, suddenly your base trim is not as affordable. But I appreciate that stuff is still available on the base. Like if I don't want to go up to a Lariat. Yeah,
because there are some people.
Right, like if you don't want
there's some people that will live without that stuff.
Exactly. If you just want to get, safety is important to me, I want to add on the Ford Copilot 360, just add that. Don't worry about all the other stuff. Or you're like, you know what? I don't care about any of this stuff. I just wish I had the more powerful engine on the base model. Okay, go ahead and do that. I appreciate that the way that they package this, it makes it, again, just like that bed, it makes it very easy to make this the truck you want it to be, with just the options that you want and not being stuck getting like all sorts of stuff you don't need. You want one little thing. I have to move up a whole trim level and I just blew an extra $8,000 or something stupid like that,
I'm going to say that my wife really liked the Ridgeline for its price and was very disappointed that it wasn't a hybrid. And she's just like, well, why isn't it a hybrid? I'm like, there's a whole, let's just move on to another car when we were shopping for cars. She's like, well, why isn't it a hybrid? I'm like,
It doesn't matter. If you don't like it, let's move on.
Yeah.
But I was just pricing out Mavericks here. And even if you go the mid-level trim, and I think the XLT that's the mid-level, is kind of the sweet spot for the Maverick. I think that's going to have the equipment that most people are going to want. And that's the one that's probably going to sell in the biggest numbers. It's under 27 with the XLT luxury package that gets you, the driver assist stuff and the full size spare and everything else. And as a hybrid, you're still well under $27,000 delivered. So I think that this is still a very affordable truck. Especially compared to anything else. And like you said, it'll do almost everything. Almost all the truck stuff that most people will want.
40 miles to gallon. That's
if you're trying to do if you're using it as a work truck, it's not going to, like, if you're someone who's, I don't know, a contractor, you build houses, a plumber or whatever, do lawns or something. Yeah, you're going to want a full size truck because this isn't enough. But for most people who just want a little bit of truck, but they're not doing legitimate, I'm making a living kind of work out of their truck, this is more than enough,
This will haul all your mulch.
You could possibly want to haul.
Your bicycles, your mulch, all
your
the things,
balls,
your soccer balls. A tow package, you can go up to 4,000 pounds towing. So if you need to tow like motorcycles or side by sides or was it Sea-Doos or whatever, Sea-Doos. You're fine. Yeah. You're fine. Jet skis. Yeah, this is 40 miles per gallon.
All right. So the other thing that we drove this week, both you and I drove it, Nicole.
Yes.
Is the Mazda MX-30. Mm-hmm. It's Mazda's first EV. Mm-hmm. What did you think?
I liked it. Oh gosh, I feel like I was not ready. My brain was still on Maverick.
I feel like there has to be a lot of
You know what? Okay, so here's the thing. Like
a lot of caveats.
There's a lot of caveats. Yes. Okay, so MX-30 first EV, go Mazda for doing your first EV. I think that's great, but it is a whopping 100 miles of range. Now I get it. Most of us don't drive more than 100 miles in a day. I mean, that is more than enough to get you through the typical day. Can I just tell you, I had the worst range anxiety. Do you know what I did? There was a spot where they said, make sure you don't take the first turn. Make sure you take the second turn. What did I do? I took the first turn. Oh. And I get on the highway, and it says to me, in 10 miles, blah, blah. And I'm like, 10 miles? Wait, am I turning around in 10 miles? Or is that just like 10 miles and I'm taking it? Oh my gosh, if I have to drive 10 miles, then that's 10 miles back. That's 20 miles. How long is this drive? And I'm like doing the math in my head. I'm thinking, did I just burn through like a fifth of my range because I made a wrong turn? And I didn't. Totally fine. It just like sort of picked up the drive route later on. But I had that moment of thinking, oh God, there are spots where if you make a wrong turn on a highway, you're suddenly driving an extra 20 miles.
You're like,
if you hit it just right. And it's like the pain of, oh God, I thought I was going to be home in 5 miles. I'm going to be home in 20. So I did have a little bit of range anxiety. My own fault because I made a wrong turn. But, I think other humans make wrong turns too.
Well,
I don't know.
All the time.
Maybe. Yeah, right. So that the 100-mile range, I get what they're saying with the part of their, during the presentation, they said people don't need the range they think they do. You don't need to be able to drive 350 miles every day. But if you buy that, it's kind of like the truck thing. If you're buying the giant F-150 to haul air most of the time, you're spending a lot of money on a truck you don't need. If you're buying a vehicle with 350 miles of range, you're spending a lot of extra money to get range that you don't need. I get it. But if that made me nervous. I had super range anxiety when I made that turn, and I'm like, that is the worst range anxiety I've ever had in my life. And I suddenly got it. I was like, this is it, because I'm in the desert. I'm going to die out here in California when I run out of range.
The desert is not a place to get lost in, by the way.
Right, exactly. And I didn't have a water bottle. I had like half of my coffee for the morning. I'm like, oh God, I'm going to die. All I got is a half a Starbucks. I'm never going to make it.
I'm going to ration it out for days.
I'm going to ration it out, sip it slowly. But I mean, that was so the 100-mile range is a little bit like, I don't know how I feel about that. The car itself, though, I mean, it drove nicely. You have that beautiful, what was the color? The soul red metallic, Sam. You just said
soul red crystal.
Soul red crystal. You got those beautiful Mazda colors. It It charges quickly because the battery is so small. It starts at $33,400, so it's relatively affordable-ish. And it has that, really smooth, quiet EV ride. They did some neat stuff on the interior. They really were all about the sustainability. So 2 things they did: when you touch the door panels, there's felt. It made me think of those little felt animals that people make. Have you ever seen little felted animal creatures that people do as a hobby? So it was really soft. It was like really nice felt. And then on the center console, like underneath it where there was a little storage area, and then where your cup holders were, and the cup holders, these little covers that flip open, it was cork, which I guess harkens back to something Mazda did at some point. They made cork, something about cork.
Back when the company started, that's what they did. It started off making cork stuff.
So
long before they got into making cars. So
it's like a callback to Mazda's roots, and it does look really cool. But I was a little concerned about that because it's cork, but it's not as if it has any kind. It doesn't feel like it has any kind of particular finish or coating or treatment or anything like that over the top of it.
So you wear it down.
Yeah, and the same with the felt. And my concern was the first time you manage to spill your coffee or drop a French fry on there, you're going to have, how easy is it going to be to clean up stains on that? And I even thought about that on the door trim, because if you live someplace where it rains or where it snows, if you have to open that window to pick up drive-through food or to pay a toll or something, it gets soaked. Like, you can get a lot of rain and a lot of snow on that. It'll make a mark on some leather that you kind of have to clean it off. I thought, what will this do to felt if it's constantly exposed to the elements? And maybe Mazda's saying, okay, other than the food thing, we don't care, because right now we're only selling it in California, and we don't have rain, and we definitely don't have snow down here. So maybe that was it. But I loved how it looked, but I was a little bit nervous about how well that would hold up with day-to-day use. So that was my summary.
Yeah, I suspect that they have addressed that. They've probably thought about that. One of the things they did talk about in the presentation is the use of recycled materials, in the interior. And some of the stuff, they inherently have to limit how much recycled material they incorporate into that. Like that fabric, is made from 20% recycled threads, recycled fibers. So that's something that, and part of the reason why they have to do that is to get the durability that they need. Because they talked about, when you're recycling fabrics, every time you recycle it, the fibers themselves get broken down and they get cut up, chopped up, and so you don't get you're not going to get as much durability. So you can recycle things like that maybe 3, 4, 5 times before they are no longer useful at least for that kind of application. Mm-hmm. So that felt only includes 20% recycled materials, and the rest is virgin materials, in order to get the durability, the ability to clean it that you talked about. I suspect with the cork, even though it's not immediately apparent, that that they have incorporated something in there to allow to limit its absorption of anything you spill on it, because they know stuff is going to get spilled.
And I would think that, and that's my assumption. Okay, they've considered the fact that it's literally part of those covers are by your cup holder, so you're reaching to flip open that cover, and you've got that, Starbucks Frappuccino in your hand that's dripping molasses and caramel and whatever, and it's going to get on things. But I mean, it's not a perfectly. I mean, it definitely it looks beautiful and it feels beautiful. Like, it has that the cork texture. It's not like they've smoothed it out so much that it no longer feels like cork. You can feel that there's crevices and cracks. It's like an English muffin, like a Thomas's, all the nooks and crannies. So you wonder if those nooks and crannies would tend to hold on to stuff. I don't know. Maybe I had too many kids in my car over my life who managed to get things stuck in perforated leather seats that hold everything in those stupid little dots. That's kind of what I was thinking of.
I mean, we've had cork floor mats in our kitchen in the past. By the stove and by the sink. And we've spilled stuff on it. It cleans up fine.
Okay.
It hasn't really been a problem.
Okay.
So it's surprisingly durable.
Okay.
In fact, when we're redoing the floor in our kitchen, we're going to be redoing the floor in our kitchen shortly, and one of the materials we actually considered was cork for the kitchen. My wife opted for something different for a variety of reasons, but it is surprisingly durable, a surprisingly durable material. So I think it will hold up pretty well.
Okay.
The rest of this vehicle, I think the thing that we have to keep in mind here is this is very much a compliance car. Mazda's building this.
They say it's
thing,
not. They will insist it's not in their
say
little
it's not,
presentation.
Yeah.
I know they're
they
saying
say it's not, but I mean the reality is it is. It's a compliance car.
Did you hear how many units they expect to sell?
Wait, 12?
No,
13.
you're slightly low. I know how many. Do you know how many it is, Sam? Did they say that during your thing?
No, they did, but I don't remember the number. It's not a huge number.
560. 560. 560.
All
It's a
right.
very small volume car.
Okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense because,
But I mean, this is based on the platform of the CX-30. So it's a modified version of the CX-30. It's got a shorter wheelbase than the CX-30. And they're kind of following the strategy that Hyundai did with the original Ioniq, and Toyota or Honda did with the Clarity, in that they've designed it to accommodate multiple powertrain configurations. So this first one that we're getting here in the U.S. is a battery electric, because they have to sell a certain number of those in California to meet the zero emission vehicle mandate standards. But they're also going to have versions of this for various markets. They also have, they already started selling this thing in Europe earlier this year, where again for the same reasons. But they're going to have versions of this that have a standard hybrid powertrain, plug-in hybrid, mild hybrid, and a series range extender, series hybrid range extender, which that is actually the one that I'm probably the most interested in, because that's the one that is using the rotary engine as the range extender, and that's coming. They declined to say exactly when it's coming, but my understanding is going to be sometime next year. That one's going to arrive. So you'll have a little rotary engine under the hood that drives a generator, so it's not going to be connected directly to the wheels, and that will provide, that will generate power to charge the battery and give you substantially more than that 100 miles of range when you need it. And there's also conventional piston engine, plug-in hybrid, and hybrid versions coming as well, but not necessarily for the U.S. market, because what they're doing is they're targeting this vehicle for global markets, and there's some places where the charging infrastructure just isn't there, isn't really set up. So, that's where they're targeting the hybrid versions and the plug-in hybrids. They specifically mentioned Mexico as an example of where you'll see the hybrid and plug-in hybrid variants. So this one will be available. It's right now it's launching in California only, but it will be available nationally starting sometime in 2022. I think what impressed me about driving it is that when it feels like a Mazda when you drive it. Mazdas have a certain feel. They're meant to be drivers' cars. It's got the same steering feel that you get in a CX-30 or a 3, which is really good. And they one of the areas that they did a lot of focus on was the brake feel. I know from my own experience as an engineer, trying to blend regenerative braking and friction braking is actually a really hard problem. Because the regenerative braking is pretty predictable in how it behaves. Friction braking, your conventional brakes where you've got brake pads that clamp onto a brake rotor, is a lot less predictable. As the pads wear, as they heat up, they behave differently. And so modeling that to try and make sure you get exactly the right amount of braking based on how hard the driver is applying the brake pedal is actually really hard. But at least within the the couple of hours that we had with this thing, it felt really good. There was no jankiness in the pedal feel. It felt very natural. I tried modulating the brakes, going up and down on the brake pedal, and it behaved very predictably, exactly as I would expect it to. Now, part of that is they opted not to do kind of the one pedal braking type of system, that you see on a lot of other EVs. But they do give you, they do use the, what would normally be the paddle shifters on the back of the steering wheel to allow you to change the amount of regen, but it'll never bring the car down to a complete stop with just regen. I like driving it. I think, we've often said that, in agreement with what Mazda says, people buy way more range than they actually need. The reality is, especially in California, 100 miles is probably going to be fine for most driving. Like studies have shown that, 75% of all daily commutes are less than 40 miles. So, 100 miles of range is probably going to be fine for most people. But then, Mazdas aren't necessarily intended to be for everybody. And one thing that Mazda is doing that's unique compared to any other manufacturer, certainly unique compared to what we saw with the first generation of EVs, like the first gen Leaf and the Fiat 500e and the Focus Electric, that had 700-mile range, is they've got a program where for the first 3 years of ownership, you get 10 days a year of free rentals. So if you're taking a road trip, if you got to go somewhere farther than 100 miles, you can go to your local Mazda dealer, and you can choose any other vehicle in the lineup for up to 10 days a year free of charge. That's all included in the price. And then after that, they have a discount on those rentals. So I think it's a it works. It should actually work out pretty well for most drivers, that choose the MX-30.
It's the Toyota Mirai and the Honda Clarity fuel cell vehicle model. I mean, that's what Toyota and Honda have done with those. Well, the Clarity I think is gone, but with the Mirais, you get 14 or 15 or whatever, however many days a year of free Toyota rentals. So when you decide you want to leave Northern California or Southern California and go on an actual drive, then you can get one of these cars. So it's. I don't think 500 and something of 5 whatever, that seems about right for sales.
500. What is it now? I forgot what it is. 569, 596.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's clearly it's very much a compliance car. I mean, you could get a 2019 e-Golf that has better specs than this. So this is 125, the same 50 kilowatt.
But the e-Golf doesn't have those rear-hinged half doors.
Oh, that's true.
Sure. What did you think about those doors, Sam? So do we say that your front doors open with your back doors? It's people hate it when you call them suicide doors, but they flip backwards to get your access to the rear seats with a little handle.
Mazda did that on the RX-8. They had the same kind of thing. It was a 2+2 coupe, and you had those half doors, rear-hinged half doors. BMW does it on the i3. It's got a similar configuration. I think the rear seat legroom is not great, because this thing is shorter than the MX-30. If you regularly need to carry a couple of extra adults in your car, this may not be the best choice for you, unless of course you happen to be short and you drive with your seat well forward. It's probably not going to be the most comfortable car, but if you're single or a couple using it as a commuter car, then it'd be fine for most of the time.
Yeah, and I do what you said about the braking. I definitely notice that as well. It is in a good way feel less like an EV when you're hitting the brakes and when you're driving than some do. The way they've modulated the brakes does feel incredibly smooth. A lot of them it takes a little time for you to figure out and then maybe mess with the regenerative brake settings to get that comfortable spot where you don't feel like it's either like it's grabbing too fast. You have to get used to them. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to get used to this at all. There was no time period where I was like, oh wait, I'm hitting that too hard, I'm hitting that too soft, which is, that can be a real issue on some cars, and it can be one that makes, getting accustomed to driving it, a little tricky.
Yeah, I mean, you can get out of a CX-9 or a CX-30 and jump right into this thing and feel right at home. You know, it drives basically the same. And I think it's 140 horsepower and about 180 or 200 foot-pounds of torque, which again, is very, ends up giving you performance that's very comparable to a CX-30. So it's right in that same ballpark. It's not going to run with a Tesla Model 3 performance or anything like that.
You don't think?
But it will, it'll do no. But it's more than enough for what people do on an average day. And then they took advantage of the behavior of the electric motor, its instant responsiveness, to incorporate that into their G-vectoring control system. And at the end of the show, I've got an interview that I did the other day with Chen, who is the head of powertrain for Mazda USA, and Dave Coleman, who's the head of vehicle dynamics. And we talked a lot about that stuff, about the powertrain and the way this car handles. So stay, make sure you listen all the way to the end, and especially if you're into the more techie stuff. We had quite a good conversation about that stuff. All right. Anything else on the MX-30?
No, that covers it for me.
560 people will buy it, and that's about it.
Yeah.
All right. Sticking with EVs for a moment. You probably heard in the news about gasoline shortages in Britain in recent weeks. Apparently, gas stations have been running out of fuel. They've had all kinds of problems with not being able to find enough truck drivers to drive the tankers to deliver gas to the gas stations. On Detroit Bureau the other day, our friend Mr. Eisenstein had an interesting article. Let me find it here, about how this is turning some drivers in the UK towards EVs, more towards EVs. And he talked to somebody from Auto Trader Group over there, which is a search engine for people shopping for vehicles. And turns out that they've had a huge increase. They've seen a huge increase in drivers, 94% over the span of just 1 week. People researching EV ownership and reviewing the EVs that they have listed on the site. And on Google, searches for EVs have climbed by 1,600%. That's 1,600% since the crisis began a few weeks ago.
Wow.
So a lot of people are now thinking that, okay, post Brexit, and post COVID, issues like this are likely to keep popping up. Supply chain issues. Maybe I should just make a switch to the EV and not have to deal with that anymore. What do you guys think about this?
I mean, it's definitely something that would make people, I think, encourage them to start looking at EVs. But how many of those people will pull the trigger and do it? Like, you're just looking and going, how much does it cost? What kind of range is there? What kind of options out there? I wonder how many of those shoppers are just like looking because they're thinking, I wonder if now's the moment. Or how many are saying, I am done with the internal combustion engine. Bring me my EV.
I mean, we'll have to find that out in 6 months when they see if there's a spike in EV adoption in the UK. But I think just the fact that people are looking at them and maybe test driving them. I mean, so many thousand are looking at them. Maybe 20% might go and do a test drive, and maybe 5% might buy one. But it does, it bodes well for EV adoption. And I was talking to FedEx, and the founder of FedEx. One of his things at one point was him and some big government people started a coalition where they talked about they were investigating electric vehicles purely from a security standpoint, because that means you're not reliant on gas, fossil fuels from other countries. If you have electric vehicles, you are just reliant on making sure that you can supply electricity to your nation, versus trying to supply electricity and importing fossil fuels. So it's sort of a if you want to be able to say, I'm self-sufficient in one way or another, you can get, solar panels, a battery, and an EV, and be like, yeah, take that. I don't know, whoever runs the, I guess BP, British Petroleum.
There you go.
Well, BP has invested heavily in the last few years in EV charging infrastructure. They bought a couple of charging companies in the UK, and they've been installing more and more chargers at their gas stations in the UK. So, and same thing's been happening with other oil companies in other regions where EVs are starting to take off, especially in Europe. We're getting a lot more chargers being installed at gas stations. So, that's the sort of thing that I think we're going to see a lot more of going forward as demand for fuel maybe starts to dry up a little bit over the next decade. These companies are going to be looking for other lines of business to make up for that.
Got to make your money. I mean, you already have the infrastructure. You already have places. They already have electricity. I mean, most of them, a lot of them have, those giant car washes. So that's not going to, so they're wired for giant power. So, I don't know how much a giant car wash costs when it comes to, I don't know how much electricity a giant car wash uses, but if they can put an EA, Electri America charging station at the IHOP near my house, I'm sure they can put them
at the IHOP. Oh my goodness! Now I want pancakes.
You guys want some? Was it Rudy Tooty Fresh and Fruity? While you're charging your EV, you can do that near where I live.
Okay. We have one comment, more of a comment than a question, before we get into that interview. This is from Sean Whitehurst. He asks, or he says, so I'm a few episodes behind, but I think losing the tank mode on the Rivian is a big loss for the urban crowd. In cities with alleys behind houses, it would be great. My alley is just over a car length wide, and I can fit a Suburban, possibly two, in my garage. If taken, it takes a half a dozen maneuvers. With tank turning, it would be a lot easier as people move back into cities where there are freestanding homes readily available to have charging hookups. These customers are going to choose for ease of use. So what do you think? Would you, first of all, have you ever lived in an area where you've got, an alley behind your house, to access your garage? And do you think something like a tank turn capability would be useful to you?
That kind of let you pivot, right? Refresh your memory. The tank turn and Rivian let you. Okay.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
Yeah,
okay.
Rivian showed a video about a year or so ago where they were using, because they've got a motor tied to each wheel, and so they can run the wheels on opposite sides of the vehicle in opposite directions, so it can turn on its own. The whole vehicle can turn on its own axis.
I've never lived someplace that required that kind of access to get in and out of my driveway or to get in and out of my garage. I mean, I can see how that would have been a huge boon for people who live in tight, congested areas. I don't know if that would. Do you think that would make someone choose to buy that truck versus another truck? I don't know. Is that big of a selling feature? Like, how high would that rate on the list? Do you guys live someplace with a really tight turn into your garage like that?
When I lived in the city, I had a fire hydrant in front of my garage. So you had to come in at this very weird angle where you almost hit a light pole. So you had to go through a light pole and a fire hydrant, and then go in and then turn. And it was difficult if you didn't know how to do it. And it took, once you know how to do it, it wasn't hard, but it wasn't easy. I could get an LR3. I could get a Land Rover in there. I could get a Model X in there. Okay. But it took like 5 minutes to get it out. I don't think tank turn was really going to help me so much. And I think that's tank turn is such a, it's like 30th on the list of things. It's just like a fun, goofy thing that you can do. And if you're buying a Suburban and you live in this really tight thing and you live in the city, it's like, where are you parking the Suburban when you're driving around?
Right?
I think you just learn. I think the thing is this is the garage that I have. This is the vehicle that I have. After about a month, you just know how to get that vehicle into the thing without tank turn.
You figure it out.
You figure it out, yeah. And now when we have like all the sensors and you have the camera on the back, like all that makes it like 1,000 times easier. Although when I would pull cars out of my garage, I would have to turn everything off because it would just be because everything was so close, and I was within
all the parking sensors.
Yeah, all the parking sensors were losing their mind, and I'd be like inches from like essentially just ripping the sheet metal off the side of all these vehicles. Which now I can tell because I don't live there anymore. So now the automakers don't know that was what was happening every day with their cars. But yeah, I think you just learn.
The other downside to tank turn in that kind of scenario, when they showed that original video a year or so ago, it was in a dirt field where it was doing that, which is fine. If you're out on a trail, being able to swivel around like that, it's great. But if you're in the city, if you're in an alley, unless the alley is unpaved, you're going to be scrubbing those tires doing that tank turn.
Because there's no give on the asphalt.
And you're going to be wearing out.
Yeah.
So you're going to be going through tires every couple of thousand miles if you're doing that all the time.
I didn't even think of how hard that would be on your
pavement.
tires. Oh my God, that would be murder on your tires if you had pavement.
It's just like every time there'd just be these black spots.
There'd be this black slip spot where you did your tank turn. That's how you'd know. Like here's a spot. It's all black rubber on the pavement.
Yeah. I do have a friend who saw somebody who's walking through the city of San Francisco, and they had just got home with their new car. It still had the Monroney on the side, and it was an H3, and he saw them trying to pull into the garage, and it turned out the car was too tall. The truck was the SUV was too tall, and he's like, "Oops!" And he pointed and laughed at him like Nelson from The Simpsons. And I kind of feel bad, but also I'm like, you don't think about that when you buy a car. That
I feel like if you're going to buy a gigantic vehicle,
you should know.
Unless you have a knowingly gigantic garage, you should be like, wait a minute.
Wait a second.
What's the height of this thing, and how tall is my garage? I feel like I'd check that.
Someone got very excited at the dealership, and they bought an one of 12 people who bought the H3, and then I guess they just parked it on the street. Which good luck with that in San Francisco, which is
wow.
Someone who lived there for nearly 20 years. It's buy a small car. That's all I'm going to tell you.
All right. Another one from Bryn Barenhausen on Twitter. And he actually retweeted a tweet from somebody else from Mass for Shut-Ins podcast. Said, cars need separate horns for hello, just FYI, the light has changed, and have a good one, and F you. And then Brent asks, so why did Town and Country horns stop being a thing anyway? I don't even remember having separate horns. Did we ever have separate horns?
I think we have separate ways of using the horn, like a quick tap with the fist, like you make a little thing, you tap it, and instead of holding it down is like the FU, but a quick tap is like when you're at the light, like it's like a beep. That's just like, hey,
there's this.
Wake up,
just to say, hey guy, the lights turned green.
I'll have to look for it. There's this comedian that occasionally does these 2 or 3 minute videos, and he had a whole thing about the different kinds of horns and what this tap, that tap, what it means. And by the end, he's at the I'm going to run you over, I hate you tap, slamming on the horn. But all the different etiquette for what, the light, I'm just, it's okay. Hey, get moving. You have to learn how to finesse it, because you got to be able to say to someone, hey, just get out of the way a little. Hey, really get out of the way, or F you move, the light's been green for a minute and a half.
Yeah.
You need to be able to have that control.
Get off your phone.
Yeah.
Get off this. Yes. The tap is like, beep, get off your phone. The double tap.
The tap is like, did you forget? Yes.
Did you forget you're driving a car? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But the that's like you're messing up. You're. I
had someone do that to me the other day at a red light. I'm at a red light and he just honks, and I'm like, it's red. I don't know what you want
here's
me to
the other
do.
thing is that sometimes when you're doing things, you accidentally hit the horn. Has that ever happened where you're behind somebody and you accidentally hit the horn for however
I've done that,
weird?
And I'm like,
sorry.
Sorry, didn't mean to honk.
See, that's where you need another horn where you're like, did it, like a little.
The apology horn.
The apology horn.
Didn't mean it.
The problem is not everyone is aware of horn etiquette. So I don't know why we don't teach stuff like that in school, where you're like,
that's
okay,
what you should.
One
you should
tap
learn
is
how to
this,
do that
double
in
tap.
driver's ed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Do we even have driver's ed? From what I see on the road, we don't. But okay.
We do. My daughter
I'm
just
pretty
went
sure we
through
don't
it, and it
anymore.
was terrible. The classes were awful. She learned nothing. She also had the instructor say to her at the very beginning of the class that the kids who already started driving with their mothers needed to spend some time on learning everything that their moms told them because we didn't know how to drive.
Wow.
Yeah, I almost wanted to punch him in the nose.
That's bad.
I didn't punch him in the nose because there were a limited number of driver's ed classes, but I was like, are you kidding me, buddy? Yeah, he
But
made little
it's not
remarks.
in school though, right? It's like the thing you got to pay for. It's like an.
I paid for this. I paid for some.
You paid for
jerk
you
to
paid for
say-
misogyny. That's great.
I paid for misogyny. I paid about $700 for misogyny so my daughter could get a driver's license. Yeah.
When I was in high school, we had to take it was a whole quarter. Like you just took driver's ed. Like it was like a regular school class. You had to take it, and then at the end, you got to drive around in a car.
No, we had to pay for it. There's one driver's ed class at our high school that has there's 400 or 500 kids in a class. There's one driver's ed class in the spring and one driver's ed class in the fall. So you could never get into it. You always have to go pay for it somewhere.
What?
So.
That's insane.
Yeah.
When my kids were learning to drive, they took driver's ed outside of school. They didn't get it at school. But then I gave them supplementary lessons on vehicle dynamics. How to handle a vehicle in the snow, doing some skid control. We went in the high school parking lot after it snowed, and I was in the passenger seat with my hand on the
E-brake,
parking brake. Proper mechanical parking brake. So that I could put it into a skid and teach them how to steer into the skid, all that kind of stuff.
That's great. Yeah,
because you never get that kind of thing that any driver has.
No, I took my kid. We also went down to the high school, and I was like, okay, big empty parking lot. Slam on the brakes in the car. Ah! I'm like, okay, here's why you don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, use that as an opportunity to show them, here's what it feels like when your ABS activates and your traction control activates.
Oh, yeah, especially
all the kind of stuff I used to work on.
They should teach that. And they really don't have any situation drivers where they ever get the opportunity to see how all those sort of safety systems work and what does it feel like when your car when you do lose traction, and that would be such a benefit, because the first time most people feel that is when it actually happens and you suddenly think, holy crap, I'm sliding or whatever,
Usually when they're out with their friends doing something stupid.
And for what it's worth, most like racing schools also offer special classes for teen drivers, car control, skid control, and they'll use skid cars that have these outriggers on them with actuators that unload the back wheels and things like that, so they can make it understeer and oversteer, and to teach you how to control a car, how to regain control out of a car, and they're not cheap. It can be a couple of $1,000s, but it's actually probably a really good investment, in making your kid a safer driver.
I can't think of it because this conversation came up last minute, so this wasn't something we were planned to talk about. But a couple of the automakers, I want to say it might be Ford and Kia, I could be wrong on that, they offer some things where they come and they do sort of free classes that they come, they did one at Foxborough Stadium once, I think it was Ford, and they let us come as journalists to try and do it, and they had a bunch of teenagers there, and it literally taught you they had the goggles to wear so you could see what it was like if you were drunk and you were trying to drive and how hard it is, and crazy, and don't ever do it. And they had the same thing, the skid control, and they had tires that were worn and tires that weren't worn so you could see how well your car braked with the right tires versus how poorly it brakes when your tires, it was a really valuable class.
It was called Driving Skills for Life.
That was it.
Is the name of the program. And they would go around the country to different locations doing it. I don't think they've done it the last 2 years for
of COVID,
obvious reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
But
I would hope that when things settle down that they will resume that.
Well, and it was neat because I believe that a parent could come, and there were a couple of parents there, but there were maybe 3 or 4 of us that were journalists. The neatest thing was the kids all thought, all of them uniformly thought, the reason that they couldn't drive with the drunk goggles on was because they were kids who didn't know how to drive yet. They're like, I bet you guys can do this. And I was like, heck Heck no. What makes you think that just because I drive a lot, if I was drunk, I could drive? They literally were not trusting it. So then all the adults were like, no. I will show you how and you try to you put those goggles on. It's like, holy heck. The kids were disbelieving that it was really that hard. They were thinking it was because it was like, oh, I'm just a kid. So if you ever do one of these and there's an opportunity for you to try to do some of the stuff your kid did, do it, because it teaches them it's not just they're young and inexperienced. There are some things you should never do, like drive drunk or drive, high or whatever. Don't do that stuff.
I think teenagers are naturally distrustful of adults, and they feel like they're being tricked a lot of the time. And we're like, no, I mean, yeah, you are being tricked a lot of the time, but sometimes not so much.
Right. Sometimes it's like, no, really, you can't drive
Sometimes
drunk.
it's for your own good.
Sometimes none of us can drive drunk. No, it's a bad disease. Don't drive.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Because,
So...
All right. Last one is from I'm a Nuisance, and he asks, or they ask, I don't know if it's male or female, how many times will Roberto's dog bark during the podcast? Well, the answer this week is zero.
Today. Zero.
They've been asleep.
And
it's a weird. So we do the podcast at times that the dogs are typically outside. We usually record in the morning. So I get up in the morning, I let them out to go to the bathroom, which they have 1 yard for the bathroom, and they have another giant backyard to run around and just be insane. And so usually at the time we're doing the podcast, they are out in the backyard. So they're all like jumpy. Or we do the podcast in the afternoon, and in the afternoon after I get off, I usually work till 5 p.m. Even though I'm freelance, I try to keep like regular human type-ish hours. I'll take them to the dog park, or they'll go out in the backyard again. And so both times are kind of like, they're like, yeah, let's go party. And so I stop the party for your benefit.
And sometimes the dogs are like, no.
And, last episode, Bowie, was barking quite a bit, and I tried to cut out most of those. I think I missed one or two. Sorry. He's very
this week.
Nope.
Yeah, he has a very, even if he's in the other room, and the door's closed, you can really hear him. And I can't. And the other one is a puppy, so I can't just sort of leave her to her own devices for a few hours while we're doing the podcast. Because if I do, at the end of the podcast, there's a disaster.
Destruction.
There's something is broken. And now I have to replace it or fix it or figure out what she has eaten and hope that she passes it. It'll be better when Nico gets a little older. But yeah, because Nico sort of gets Bowie all excited about barking.
But life is always better with dogs. So an occasional bark, it's worth it.
Yeah.
So, all right. With that, right after we say goodbye, we will have the interview that I did earlier this week with Chen and Dave Coleman. Jay is the head of powertrain for Mazda USA, and Dave is head of driving or vehicle dynamics. And we talk about a whole bunch of cool stuff about the MX-30. So stay tuned for that right after we say goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Sam here. I've got Chen, who is the powertrain manager for the new Mazda MX-30, and Dave Coleman, who is the vehicle dynamics manager for the MX-30. And just had a chance to drive this vehicle yesterday. Nicole's driving it tomorrow. We're not going to talk about our driving impressions just yet, but during the presentations before we went out for a drive, Jay and Dave talked about some really interesting things around the design of this vehicle. The MX-30 is a unique product for Mazda. Mazda is an interesting company as an automaker. They've always kind of marched to the beat of their own drummer. They've done things a little differently. Longtime proponent of Wankel rotary engines, which I love. Still build Miatas, which are an increasingly rare type of vehicle in the world today. And the MX-30 is your first EV. And let's start off with just kind of an overview of this vehicle, quick overview about the platform and what was the overall strategy in designing this vehicle.
Well, I don't know. We're both sitting here waiting for the other guy to start talking, but I'll kick off with that. Really, we're just dipping our toe into the EV landscape right now, But the idea is we're building this off of a CX-30 platform, but trying to really differentiate it from the CX-30 itself. So that's why it's riding on a completely different body. But what you see a lot of times when in the EV world is you see either a really expensive high performance EV or something that is pretty expensive but feels really cheap. And this comes from the fact that the batteries themselves are really expensive and drive up, the base price of the car. And so your two strategies are either you spend all of your budget on batteries and cheap out on the interior, cheap out on the body, cheap out on everything else that makes the car pleasant to exist in, or you start from the expensive platform and you build a really expensive car. We wanted to take a different approach and try to balance the battery size versus vehicle quality thing differently so that you actually have a nice car to drive at an affordable price. And so that's why we come into this segment with what most people will think is a surprisingly low range of 100 miles. We've really found that if you really look at the way people drive, 100 miles is plenty for most of their driving. They only will occasionally take a long trip. And so by putting a smaller battery in the car, we're able to deliver the rest of the car at a much higher level. So you have a really nice high quality interior, really great driving experience. And then we can cover the few times when you need the longer range than that by simply letting the people who own the car borrow a Mazda from their local dealer. The car comes with a plan where you have, oh boy, I have to remember the exact
I think it's
rules
first
on
3
it.
years. You get 10 days a year.
Yeah, it's first 3 years. I think it's 10 days a year where you can borrow another car. So realistically, how many days a year are you on a road trip? Okay, you're traveling car journalist, so you don't count. Neither do I. But normal people, that covers their long driving trips, and then the rest of the time, they have enough range for their daily driving. And this is really both a better play, I think, for balancing where you put the cost of the car so we can have a more pleasant car to live with, but also for balancing. If you look at, batteries as a resource, we could build a 300-mile range car, or we could build 3 of this car with the same number of batteries. And so this is a much better use of the batteries rather than dragging heavy batteries around all the time in a car that you're not actually using those batteries. Carry around the number of batteries that you're actually going to use, and then take a road trip into one of our other cars.
Right, and Dave hits on it as a much more practical solution. I mean, just as Mazda is just dipping our toes into the EV waters, I think there are customers that are doing that. There's customers that are just full on, all gung ho into the EV world. But we're targeting customers that are, a little bit timid about it, and they want to get into a car that they can, feel good about, feel comfortable in, drives normally intuitively like their gas car that they're used to. Right, and not have to deal with the range anxiety. The thing is, as Dave says, this Mazda MX-30 Elite Loaner Pro. I think if you're going to take that handful of road trips in a year, I would prefer to not have to deal with a lot of the existing charging infrastructure on a long road trip. I would just do it in a gas car. As we've been saying, things kind of progress hand in hand, side by side. Infrastructure, range, right? It's not all one or the other. So I think the main point is that we want our customers who are looking at the MX-30 to feel comfortable getting into the EV and not be totally blown away by this alien landscape and this wild west of EV life.
Yeah, I think that approach of having that loaner program is a really good solution. I mean, it's certainly something I've talked about over the years, until relatively recently when we've started getting EVs with longer ranges. The idea that most people are not road tripping every week. They do it a couple times a year. They take a summer road trip with the family, or go visit the grandparents or whatever it might be. And most of the time they're just driving around town. And unfortunately, car buyers are not always necessarily completely rational in their decisions. People tend to buy for their worst case use case condition. They may get a big SUV or a pickup truck because they need to tow their boat, out to the lake in the springtime and haul it out of the lake in the fall. But they're not using it as a truck most of the time. Similarly, for something like this, they're commuting most of the time, and a couple times a year they might need something for longer ranges. And I think this is a really interesting solution. Of course, it's not the only solution that you've got planned. You've got a whole range of options available that you've got coming, for both for different markets and different use cases. Jay, can you talk a little bit more about what the using this particular vehicle architecture, the CX-30 architecture? What are you going to be able to do with the MX-30 and different variations of powertrains?
Well, so Mazda being a smaller company, we still take sustainability and mobility seriously, right? And so with our resources, when we look at solutions for mobility and all that, we have to look at it from a world perspective. It's not like we developed the MX-30 specifically just for the US market or for this or that market. So by doing that, if we have this platform to start, getting really seriously electrified, we need to offer solutions for different regions. Now, different regions have different charging infrastructure. I'm sure we all realize that. And a lot of people don't realize is that the power generation in different regions is also different. So let's say, for example, if you're living in California, we have a lot of solar, we have a lot of wind. If you're living in Norway or Scandinavian countries, you have geothermal, you have wave, you have a lot of really clean energy. And in that way, it makes sense to use a lot of EV and charging. But if you were living in a place that, was using a lot of burning coal, or even let's say burning clean LPG, well, that's still generating CO2. And so do you really want to be using CO2 and inefficiently transporting it over the grid and putting it into your EV so you could drive? So the concept behind this is that we offer the MX-30 using this multi-solution scalable architecture. Long words, but basically it means we could put different Lego pieces of powertrain into it. There's space for a gasoline or internal combustion generator. We can reallocate battery sizing and put a small fuel tank in there, or a large fuel tank, or we can shift different battery sizes, small, medium, large, and the engine size can also potentially be changed. So this gives us the solution to build anything from a mild hybrid inside the MX-30 platform to a strong or conventional hybrid that has been on the market for many years, which is still good. It gets better MPG. We could build it as a range extender, a plug-in hybrid, or in the case of the first initial release for California and then subsequently other states, it would be a full battery electric. But it has to make sense, right? It has to make sense for the customer. It has to make sense for the environment. It has to make sense for us as a manufacturer too. We got questions. Well, why aren't you offering this BEV in these states? Well, yeah, it might be a novelty item for certain people that really want it, but like we said, the infrastructure, the energy, everything's going to kind of move in pace with each other. It's, putting this on sale for that one region, for that one customer that wanted it, just like our diesel wagon Mazda 6, it doesn't really make sense. So that's the main thing about the scalable architecture, and it's right tool, right solution, being environmentally responsible. And it's different for different regions throughout the world and throughout maybe even one market like North America.
Yeah, I think you left brown off of your example of the diesel manual wagon.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And manual too. Yes, it has to be manual.
Brown. Right.
Yeah. And if you had offered that car, that brown manual Mazda 6 diesel wagon, I would have bought that.
Yeah. You and three other people.
So with some of these other variants, will we be seeing? I think there's been some discussion of a range extended or series hybrid version of the MX-30 following the battery electric here in the U.S. market. Is that something that we'll be seeing in the not too distant future?
Well, we have officially announced that for North America, we will be releasing a series plug-in hybrid version of the MX-30. And so that is taking the scalable architecture, and we are now putting an internal combustion engine into it. And because it's a series hybrid, the engine is not connected to the drive wheels. It's just generating power, right? So this is this mixed match. And so this solution would be a slightly different customer, a slightly different usage need, right? Maybe your teenager that wants to do their more common road trips, but wants to feel clean and green, and that can commute around town with adequate, get to school or, run their errands and this and that. As far as release dates and all those additional things, I don't want to take away from our launch of the battery electric version right now. But we understand that it's a customer that might be looking for just a slightly different permutation of the usage for the current MX-30 battery electric version.
One last question about that before we move on. Will that series plug-in hybrid, will that be the one with the rotary engine?
I don't know what we've officially released as far as the powertrain. And I think Zach or one of the PR guys can answer that for you. If we've announced exactly what it is, then I'll be more than happy to discuss it with you.
I know Mazda has been granted a patent on that architecture, so we'll hopefully we'll see the return of the rotary in the not too distant future as part of the MX-30 lineup or other vehicles from Mazda. All right, so moving on, continuing with electric drive. And also starting to blend in some of the vehicle dynamics characteristics of this car that you talked about, Dave. The one of the beauties of electric motors is their responsiveness, that instant torque, and that ability to control it very precisely, which gives you a number of advantages, both in terms of drivability that you've talked about, Jay, and also a new take on the G-vectoring control system that Mazda has had for a number of years now. Can you talk about how those two things work hand in hand and what that does for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me back up one step even before that, just to explain sort of the layout of this vehicle with a lot of battery weight in the car, really down low and really far back, and a relatively small drive motor in the front. The weight balance of the car has completely shifted from where a CX-30 is about 60% on the front tires and 40% on the rear. This is 60% on the rear tires, 40% on the front, and the center of gravity is really low. It's about 2 inches lower than in a CX-30. So what this is giving us sort of as a starting point is the weight distribution and center of gravity of like a mid-engine sports car, which is can be both good and bad. Mid-engine sports car handling potential is really high, but the dynamics can feel a little bit strange for someone who isn't a really kind of pro driver or good at sorting out how different cars work. The problem with a mid-engine car is because the front end is so lightly loaded, the turn-in response isn't very good. The tire doesn't have enough vertical load on it to really have the direct response to that initial steering wheel input. So a good driver, what they'll do is when they're coming into a corner, will trail brake, and that will shift weight onto the front tires and make the front end bite and make the steering response be the way they're expecting it to be. And that feeds into what we're doing here with G-vectoring control. So G-vectoring control is a system that we developed a couple of years ago based on that very concept of looking at what professional drivers do to make a car handle better. They are constantly doing weight shifting forward and back onto the front tires off the back of the front tires. So you shift onto the front tires at turn in to make the car turn in better, and then you shift it onto the rear tires, which are pointed straight to help the car straighten back out of a corner. And a good driver will do that completely subconsciously. And what we've done is just automated that so that we take input from the electric power steering computer, and it looks at your steering wheel speed and uses that to tell the powertrain to reduce power a little bit and shift weight onto the front tires. And what we end up with is a much more direct, consistent steering response that really makes the controllability of the car very, very natural. The steps that we're able to take it farther with the electric powertrain is how quickly the powertrain can respond and how precisely it can respond and how often it can respond. So if our weight transfer when we turn the wheel is controlled by reducing engine power, there's an obvious problem there that when you're not driving the car, so you're coasting or braking or going downhill, there's nothing to reduce. we can't do weight transfer in those conditions where we're not actually accelerating or at least pulling along the car at constant speed. With an electric motor, we can't. We can always do a little weight shift because the electric motor can do regenerative braking. And even if we're already off throttle and in full regen, there's a little bit more regen we can always throw in with GVC. So every time you turn the wheel, we're automatically shifting weight onto those front tires and making it behave as if it were a normal front bias car in terms of steering response. But then in terms of grip balance, because we have the weight more evenly distributed between all four tires are doing their job to help the car go around the corner. So it's really kind of a best of both worlds scenario where we get the handling potential of a mid-engine car and the natural driving dynamics of a front-engine car all pieced together in a car with no engine at all.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that you mentioned in the presentation was with an ICE doing G-vectoring control. Once you lift off the throttle and you're coasting, you don't have any torque there that you can manipulate. Right. But there's with an EV, with an electric motor, you still have that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right. So the best we can do with an ICE system is make the car steering response behave the same way that it would if you're off throttle. So off throttle, the car has a certain steering response, and on throttle, the steering response will get a little bit weaker because the weight shifted off the front tires. And using this automatic weight transfer system with GVC, we can make the car behave the same way it did when you were coasting. Right? That's the maximum potential we can do. With the electric motor, we can do that weight transfer even when you're off throttle, even when you're coasting, even when you're doing regenerative braking. So we can sort of aim for our ideal steering response and use the amount of weight transfer that we need to get that response in every condition. That combined with the fact that in a very weird roundabout way, an electric vehicle lets us have a stiffer tire, simply because of the way the powertrain is mounted differently, and the way that we don't have to worry about making the powertrain bounce on its mounts, which is kind of an esoteric suspension tuning problem that we have. I won't bore you with that. But we have a stiffer tire and a stronger GVC response, which gives us this really direct natural steering response. So we're really happy with the way the car steers and handles, which kind of brings us back to the thing about you're talking about how people don't buy their car completely on rational reasons. We're quite pleased with that because we spend a lot of our effort doing completely rational things like making the car fun to drive.
Yeah.
You don't, right? So yeah, there is still plenty of room for passion and enjoyment in an electric car, let me tell you.
Jay, with the electric motors, you talked about the minimum jerk theory and how jerk impacts the way passengers or occupants in the vehicle perceive the performance. Can you talk a bit about that and how an EV helps you to minimize jerk?
Wow, that's a complicated one. The EV really actually helps us control jerk as we intended to. Just as a rehash, jerk is the change of acceleration. And going back to our simplified analogy, when you ride in a school bus, it has a lot of jerk as the driver changes gears and this and that. It's uncomfortable, right? And for those of us that have ridden as passengers in some EVs, we kind of get that feeling. On the flip side, if you have minimum jerk, a very natural, intuitive motion that we as humans like, say like riding on a bullet train, you don't feel this jerk, but you can still get a lot of things done. You can still accelerate at a very high rate. So basically, we as humans like to do things with the least amount of jerk necessary and the smoothest profile. And that's just to save energy and, minimize wear and tear. Well, the electric motor is very powerful and very responsive, as Dave has already alluded to. And so it gives the ability to generate a tremendous amount of jerk or change in acceleration in a very short amount of time. And that could be very good if you had this very high intention, but it's not always that case, right? We're not always driving to be a jerk on the freeway or this and that, right? So
different definitions of jerk here.
That's right. I should probably
the engineering definition versus the sociological definition.
Yeah. But so I think we recognize that not all people want to drive in that manner. And even though an electric vehicle offers these opportunities, we intentionally tuned our vehicle to, one, primarily mimic the intention of the driver in a smooth, equal motion, but at the same time, not be so touchy sensitive that it can that it could be uncomfortable for the driver, uncomfortable for the passenger, or be at times even difficult to control. Maybe you hit a hot pothole and your foot accidentally tipped into the gas a little bit and the car jumped forward. That's completely possible with the EV. And so back to the target customer, the intention, when we released this car, we wanted to make sure that, hey, this is an intuitive, natural transition for the guy that's got their second car, that's the ICE, and they're driving that, and they get into this, or their wife gets into this for one day and isn't completely freaked out by it. Say, oh yeah, okay, that's cool, and it's quiet, and it does all the things that I expect it to, and it's not a science project to figure out how to get this thing running or even driving smoothly. Hopefully that answers what you were after.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good explanation for the listeners of how all this stuff works together. So one of the other beautiful things about electric motors is that, unlike an ICE, the process is completely reversible. You can put energy into a motor and get torque to drive the vehicle, or you can use the motion you have to get energy back out of the motor. Once you burn the gasoline, you're done. Realistically, you're never going to convert that exhaust back into fuel on board a vehicle. Can you talk about how on the MX-30 you're handling regenerative braking and what the benefits of that are?
Go for it, Dave.
This is an interesting area that sort of crosses over between Jay's department and my department, of course, because the regenerative braking is part of the powertrain department's job, but the implications of what that regenerative braking do have all kinds of effect on what we have to do on the chassis side. So at the most basic level, of course, we get to basically reverse the purpose of the motor and turn it into a generator when you get off the throttle, and use the inertia of the car to charge the batteries, which is a really one of the biggest benefits of an electric car, and one of the reasons that you have some things that run against your intuitive understanding of cars. You're used to looking at how much range you have left in your tank, and if you get stuck in traffic, that range might not be enough because, of course, in stop and go traffic, the car's less efficient. Electric cars are exactly the opposite. It's more efficient in stop and go traffic because for every time you decelerate, you're just putting energy back into the battery, and you're not throwing away a bunch of energy pushing air around the car because you're moving so slowly. So it's one of those things that just sort of you have to reorient your mind to what seems intuitively obvious when you're driving one of these cars. But in terms of making the amount of sort of engine braking feel that you get from regenerative braking, making that intuitive for people is tricky because what people want really seems to vary a lot person to person. Some people are used to a car where they let off the gas and it just coasts. Some people are used to prefer a car where you let off the gas and it slows down really hard. It probably goes back to what they learned to drive on. They learned to drive on some floaty automatic transmission car that coasted a lot. That's what feels natural. If they learn to drive on a brown diesel manual wagon, that's going to have a lot of engine braking, right? So that's going to feel natural. So most electric cars will have buried in the settings menu some place where you can change the amount of regenerative braking to kind of fit your preference. We went ahead and pulled that up right up in front and gave it put that control in the paddle shifters that we would have used for an automatic transmission in this car. So there's a minus paddle on the left steering spoke and a plus paddle on the right steering spoke. And every time you start the car, it'll start out with sort of a neutral setting that's got a mild amount of regenerative braking that kind of feels close to a normal automatic transmission car. If you hit the upshifting, you get less and less regen. And if you hit the minus, you have more and more regen. So when you let off the gas, it slows down a lot. The side effects of that are that we want there to be a really linear controllability from the gas pedal to the amount of G that you get, both on the positive side and the negative side. So when we have a lot of regen, we need more pedal stroke to control how much the car is slowing down. So we shift the neutral point in the gas pedal when you change that pedal. So the point that you'd hold the gas pedal at to just cruise down the highway will get deeper and deeper in the pedal, which means the whole gas pedal mapping shifts as you change these pedals, which also means that if you're just cruising along and you hit the upshift paddle to get less regen, it actually goes a little bit faster each time because it's moving where you are in the gas pedal stroke, where the software is interpreting that. Where that really affects me and my team is in the brakes, because at the same time that we're giving the driver all this control over how much regen there is, we are going to, at the end of the day, use the maximum amount of regen that's possible to maximize the efficiency of the car. So all we're doing is we're shifting whether the driver controls the gas pedal or whether it's hidden in the brake pedal. When you step on the brake, what you're actually feeling, in a normal car, you're feeling a piston building up hydraulic pressure, pushing on another piston that's squeezing on a brake rotor. You're actually feeling the mechanism of braking. When you step on the brake pedal in this car, you're feeling a spring, a little elastomer that you're pushing on. And the way that we fool your brain into thinking that that's a real brake pedal is we give you exactly the amount of braking G to go with the amount of spring that you're pushing on that would match what it would feel like in a normal braking system. But where that braking G comes from completely depends. We can switch it between regen braking and friction braking from the brakes at the wheels, kind of on the fly, depending on how much regen you're already using. If you're already 90% of the car's regen is used from the gas pedal, we'll give you a little 10% at the brake pedal and then start feeding in the friction brakes early. If you are in the mode where there's almost no regen and you're coasting, when you hit the brakes, most of the slowing down that you feel comes from regen. And then when you've used all that up, we'll start putting a little bit of friction brake. And we even change it depending on the charge of the battery. If the battery's completely full and we turn on a generator, there's no place for that power to go. We can't put regen into nowhere. So we just have to go straight to friction brake. So there's all this sort of behind the scenes hocus pocus in the brake pedal to make the brakes feel completely normal. And hopefully when you drove the car, you couldn't tell that all this crazy stuff was happening. It just felt like normal brakes, right? In reality, it's constantly switching back and forth between regen and friction and some combination of the two to capture as much energy as possible while giving the driver the most natural controllability.
Great.
Yeah, and sorry, Sam. Let me add into that. It's just this is again going back to that natural driving thing, right? I think a lot of us really freak out the first time we get into an EV, and the brakes just feel very awkward, or a blended hybrid system. The brakes just don't feel intuitive. So that's a big plus. And the second thing is that the paddle system to control regeneration and the pedal position, that's actually also helpful in a way, because sometimes as you're driving in traffic, you have a certain mindset and you want more deceleration, but then you get out into open traffic or you're just cruising and you don't want this high precision deceleration response from your accelerator pedal. So that's another potential. This gives you the opportunity to choose how you want to do it.
Okay. Yeah. As someone that has owned manual transmission cars my entire life, every car that I've ever owned that's been my primary car has been a manual. And hopefully I'll live, I'll be able to continue that trend for my remaining days. You might guess where I fall on that spectrum. I
hit the left paddle
as I've driven a lot of EVs over the past 15 years, I really appreciate the strong regen. I was just wondering, was there any thought given to, in addition to the paddles, just having a one pedal mode switch to activate? So if somebody just wanted strong regen all the time, they could just hit that switch and not go back and forth with the paddles.
Let me jump in on the first side of that. Your question is almost a two-part, because you mentioned one pedal, and in our studies of human-centric motion and perception, we've really debated this internally and talked about this. Okay, well, do we want one pedal, which by our definition and understanding is the ability to stop all the way without ever using the B pedal or the brake pedal? And in our evaluations, long before EVs and everything else, we understood that human perception and motion in deceleration and braking takes two modes. The initial is a deceleration control mode, where you're just gauging by feeling and by the visual flow going past you. You're more concentrated when you're slowing down from 50 miles per hour that initial focus is just bring the speed down. And then after you get down to about a 5 mile per hour, or I'm sorry, probably like 7 mile per hour range, then you become more sensitive to position. Your focus then shifts into, okay, I need to stop here before I hit the parking bumper, or I need to stop to this point so I can hit the apex correctly, right? For that, low speed right turn. And so in our human-centric study, we found that it's okay to control, you can adequately control deceleration through an A pedal, but when it comes to precision and higher G deceleration, you need the positive control, if you understand, a pushing positive control on the B pedal to more precisely control that. As we know, as you're decelerating, just like our shifters, your body motion is moving forward. So if you're down decelerating, you're downshifting forward. Similarly, that action would work more because you have a brake pedal supporting your weight and all that for that final bit. So that's the braking perception / control ideal. Again, a lot of flavors and a lot of interpretations. This is how we as Mazda kind of have focused on it as old school car guys and how do you say? Yeah, we could be a little stubborn like that, and
No, I understand
touching on something here that I think makes sense to us because we're in this world so much that I think might require a little bit more explanation. That's this human-centric engineering, which is kind of like Jim by Tai, one of those things that seems like a throwaway tagline, but is actually some insight into a really deep and different way that Mazda as a company operates. When we talk about human-centric engineering, we are talking about us trying to figure out what is fundamentally going on in the human subconscious that makes a car feel natural, right? And when we're accelerating, take away the car, and when a person is walking, when they're accelerating, they accelerate with their calf. When you push off on the end of each step, you're pushing off with your calf. And as you have to balance your body against that acceleration, there's a natural acceleration that comes from that push from your calf. And then you're balancing mostly the part of you that's still balancing in a car, because everything else is supported by the seat, is your neck supporting your head, right? And so you see a very direct relationship between pushing off with your calf muscle and tensing these neck muscles right here. And that you go back to this minimum jerk thing that Jay keeps talking about. If you look at the profile, the force profile exerted by any mammal's muscle when they move, it follows this acceleration curve that minimizes the total amount of jerk because that takes the least amount of energy, and eating food is hard. And so you will have this acceleration profile from your calf muscle that you then respond to with your neck muscle. And that is sort of behind all of these weird little decisions we make about why is the brake pedal so heavy? We make our brakes heavier than, say, a lot of German cars do, for example. German cars, when you're coming to a stop on a German car, you tend to have so much grab on the brake pedal that you're actually lifting off the brake as you're coming to a stop. Well, controlling with your shin as you're trying to control, that's completely unnatural. We keep the brake heavy enough that you're still pushing with your calf because that's the muscle that's tied to your balance center in your brain, and that's how we naturally intuitively balance. You see a lot of cars where they have a manual shift mode, and upshift is forward and the downshift is backwards. Well, that puts the G-forces in the wrong orientation for the direction you're pushing. We and BMW and only Porsche GT cars, not the rest of their cars, go the right way. So all these weird little decisions like that come from sort of a deep philosophy of trying to figure out what is intuitively human to make a car enjoyable to drive.
No, that makes.
I don't know if that made more sense or less sense.
I mean, to me, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm an engineer, so I get it, and and thinking about it from that perspective of the human interaction with the machine, and how our bodies respond to the motions of that machine. I think it makes a lot of sense in that perspective. So I appreciate that explanation. And for what it's worth, I agree that there is a very different control as you're slowing down and coming to a stop, when you're doing, if you're using a vehicle, an EV with one pedal driving, and it's definitely something that people aren't used to, and I've become accustomed to it, but I can definitely see, where it does actually make a lot of sense, the way you described it, of, as you get to that transition point, somewhere around 6 or 7 miles an hour, moving over from the accelerator pedal to the brake pedal, to have that precision control at the very end of the stop, as you come to a stop. So that does make a lot of sense.
To shift away from your weak shin muscle onto your stronger and much more precise calf. Which that's the muscle that's used for all of the big G-forces in your real life.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Well, I mean, I think that answers a lot of the topics that I wanted to cover in this, in terms of the powertrain. Oh, I guess one other area that we didn't really dive into, Jay, is the battery itself. We talked about the way you chose the size of the battery, but can you talk a little bit about the technology of the battery itself? What if you can say what chemistry is, and kind of the construction of the battery? I'm curious about that.
Well, ironically, I am more focused on the driving fuel side instead of the electrons and the battery management and the battery control side. But it is a lithium-ion battery, and the configuration, I'm not too particularly versed in that. I think there's other guys that have more in-depth knowledge about that.
All right.
We can try to get back to you about that, but I think it's. We have our supplier for that, and so it's not groundbreaking or necessarily a breakthrough in terms of battery technology.
Okay, all right. Well, that's fine. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to talk through all this stuff. I think that as usual with Mazda, you've taken a slightly unique approach that that I think a lot of people will appreciate, and it'll be interesting to see how the market reacts to what you've done here with the MX-30, because it is a unique vehicle in the segment, in terms of EVs and how you've approached in it, and I think it's very consistent with Mazda, with the way you do all your vehicles. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been great.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.